Alright, what is going on, guys? Today is a very big day for the FD. I'm actually going to be rebuilding the turbo on the FD. So if you guys don't remember, actually last time I did pull the turbo out, and the reason was because the return line was leaking oil. So it was leaking from the return line, I should say. So pretty much a month after I did that, putting it back together, it was leaking again. So I'm trying to find out exactly what is the issue. My guess and DK's guess is that the oil seal and the piston rings has gone bad inside the turbo. So thankfully I have a rebuild kit, thanks again to DK for that. Gonna rebuild the turbo from inside out and just check if I need to replace like the return line gasket or the feed gasket again. But I'm gonna go ahead and inspect everything. Thankfully I already went ahead of the game and took the turbo out. So that's honestly, I think, like probably one of the hardest part of this whole installation is taking the turbo out, just because it's more labor intensive. But as far as tearing apart the turbo, it's really not that bad. It's just a little bit more tedious and you have to remember the order of things. There is a guy that showed a video, like a step-by-step process of how to rebuild a T4 turbo, T3 or T4, which is what mine is. I'm gonna go ahead and link his video down below in the description. I'm gonna go ahead and start tearing apart the turbo and see what goes on. So as you can see, I already took the turbo out. Gasket is somewhat new. I mean, I replaced it last time. It's the Vibrant T4 gasket. So it looks like it's a little bit cracked in the middle. I have an extra one, thankfully. I'm probably just gonna replace it. Everything else looks good though. It's just the worst thing about this manifold, and I believe this is the CX Racing manifold, is just the fitment of getting the nuts out on this side and this side when you have like the turbo on. So it's just the absolute worst time trying to take those nuts out. And there she is again, out. So gonna go ahead and pretty much take off all the screws from the hot side, all the screws from the cold side. Trick is to pretty much to mark where your turbo is clogged, and I'm gonna be using a Sharpie to mark that, probably somewhere here and then somewhere on the hot side as well, like right here. So just to remember how I have this turbo clogged. But yeah, look at all that oil. Pretty crazy, and it's kinked there too, which is not good. So probably the hose was a little bit too long. The turbo blanket also is somewhat new. I did replace it last time. It's really not that bad. It's just a tiny bit like torn / burned, but that makes sense. I mean, it's sitting on the hot side, so, and then this is not a PTP or anything, it's just a thermal 0. So it's holding pretty good. Definitely can use it again. And last thing, kind of random, but I just want to show you guys, I finally got the OEM Mazda Club Aero Package. So it comes with this little rear diffuser skirt, is what they call it. Looks really good. It's a subtle change, but the subtle changes actually make a really big difference. Definitely am in love with it. And a side skirt extension as well. So pretty easy. I mean, you just slap it over the original side skirt, and you have to drill new holes underneath the bottom to secure it. And then it's also held by 3M tape. Otherwise, it looks pretty good. This car's coming along little by little. Alright, update so far. I got the turbo disassembled for the most part, as you guys can see. Cold side is out, hot side is out. And pretty self-explanatory. You just have to take the bolts out of the cold side and then the bolts out of the hot side. I did leave marks, like I mentioned earlier in the video, just to have the position of my turbo clock the way it was before. Everything looks pretty good, except right here, the piston rings are totally done. So that's part of the reason why it's also leaking, just as I assumed. There is minimal to no shaft play for the turbines. I have it on a microfiber, so it's not damaging anything. But look at this guy, completely caked in oil. Unbelievable. No wonder why it was leaking. And some was coming out from here. And again, the video that I linked down below shows how to disassemble this more in detail. But pretty much on the cold side, there's like a nut, which is that guy. It's a 10mm nut that you have to take out, and on the hot side you have to hold a 3/4 inch on there's a nut on the underside of this turbine to pretty much hold this from spinning. So progress is going well so far. I'm gonna go ahead and clean everything, replace all the rings, continue to disassemble more, and see what I need to do from there. Alrighty, so update on where I'm at. It's no longer caked. At least this part isn't caked anymore. So I used some steel wool, kind of just like wrapped it around, make sure it's all smooth and clean. So this is good to go. And I cleaned the hot side turbine shaft. So this is looking really good now. I'm gonna have to just clean a little bit more on the ring right there that you see, and a little bit like right here on the bottom. But so far so good. Once I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and remove these 4 10-mil bolts that you see that I have my wrench on right now. And pretty much that'll allow me to take off from this to this. Like, it'll be 2 separate pieces, and you guys will see what's going on after that. That's where I start replacing a lot of the main components, like the rings and piston rings and all that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that and give you guys an update. Took it apart. It is caked. It is absolutely caked. Like, a lot of this, like the burrs that you see, the small shards, it's from the O-ring right there. And yeah, the O-ring's done. I mean, look at it. It's completely just gone. But yeah, all the rings that you see inside, I'm gonna replace. Bearings, gears in here as well. And then also on the underside of this, once I flip it, it's gonna be almost like the same thing with the rings inside there. So yeah, this is pretty gnarly. But I'm glad I'm doing all this now because it's gonna be worth it. I'm not gonna have to deal with this again for a very long time, and at that point I'll probably get a new turbo. And then here's the kit, the rebuild kit. So this is what I'm looking at right here. So you guys can see the fresh, they even gave fresh hardware, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the small little O-rings, piston rings, and gears. So pretty cool.
2 hours later.
Alright guys, so to kind of wrap up what's going on here. So I replaced all the piston rings. One of them you can actually see right there, how it's like kind of loose like that. It's actually supposed to be loose. So replace that guy, and I replaced one right there. You guys can see like that brown ring. Everything's all clean, everything's all good to go. So it's honestly a matter of assembling everything back. Now I do have this guy, a spare like gear, which I might actually change for that gear, just have everything brand new. But once I do that, I pretty much slap the cold side back onto here, and then bolts, the 4 bolts which I had originally there, which I might actually switch to the new hardware just cause. And then once I do that, I flip this on the other side and I slap the cap back on, and then the turbine, and then pretty much just reassemble like the whole housing back together. So honestly, the installation was really not bad. Again, like, I followed what the guy said, and it's pretty straightforward. You know, he went pretty slow in his like explanations and really clear on what he did. But these are all the old parts. Didn't look too bad except for the O-ring gasket right there. But yeah, like the bearings and like the clamps, they honestly weren't too bad. But yeah, gonna go ahead and assemble everything and show you guys the final product. Alright guys, well as far as the main assembly goes, putting everything back together and the internals of the turbo is pretty much done. I'm just gonna have to do cold side housing and the hot side and clock it back to how it was. But yeah, everything seems good. Little to no shaft play like I mentioned. Tying this guy, which is interesting because this is, I found out, well, also from the video, that this is a lefty tighty righty loosey, so it's opposite. But besides that, I mean, everything else was really like straightforward. And I also got this guy, so if you come with me to the engine bay, you can't see it, but pretty much somewhere in the engine bay there is a return line fitting that goes to the block. It's like underneath like where that belt is. So it's a really short one. I believe it's actually like up to here or something where my thumb is. So what this is an extender, obviously, and the purpose of that is I just feel like it's easier to reach the clamp to tighten if it ever gets loose, and you know, it shortens like the hose length as well from the turbo to this fitting. My only thing is, I mean, according to DK, he said it would fit, but I just have to see if this side of the fitting's gonna like fit to the block. If not, then I'll just have to use the OEM fitting that's on there. Otherwise, it's pretty much coming back together really fast, all within one day. So I'm really happy with the progress, but probably am going to, once I'm done is like throwing all that together tonight, I think tomorrow morning, that's when I'm gonna, we'll put this on to see if it fits, and then slap the turbo back on and tighten everything down, and then from there go and just test drive it and see if there's any leaks. So I just pray to God that there's no more leaks, because if there is, I'm literally gonna retire this turbo and probably go with an EFR setup, which requires me to do like a, you know, new manifold and stuff. So but we'll see from there. Otherwise, that's temporarily it for tonight. I'm gonna pick it back up in tomorrow's vlog, throwing the turbo back onto the car and see where it goes from there. So stay tuned. And we're back to the next day. So currently what I have going on right now is I slapped the turbo temporarily back on. I'm still trying to bolt the nuts to the manifold, the turbo manifold. And then once I do that, I have to hook up the downpipe to the hot side using the V-band right there. And once I do that, I have to hook up the return line, which I threw on some new heat wrap. If you could see right there, the gold wrap. I cut a little bit of the pipe too, because apparently it was too long originally, so that's why it was kind of kinking up a little bit right there in the middle. But I went ahead and cut a little bit, so it should help, and I'll just have to scoot that pipe towards the fitting more, which actually, speaking of fittings, I ended up not using it because I realized that this ended up being the same length as the one I have currently on the car. So I mean, rip, this only costed like 15 bucks, so I didn't mind. Plus this was thinner than the one that's currently on the car, and I kind of didn't like that, and I just felt like the one that's on the car, I mean, it's stronger as far as the flange goes. So I'm just gonna use what's currently on the car and leave this. Oh yeah, one more thing, this saves me so much. So what this is pretty much like a inspection camera, and I have this going all the way to where the manifold bolts would go. The reason being is because the fitment on this either CX Racing or Godspeed turbo manifold is an absolute pain in the butt as far as fitment goes. So trying to stick your finger there and just having a feel for it as to where you need to put stuff as far as, like, you know, screwing the nut back on, it's just absolutely a pain. So at least I have some sort of visual here, because if I don't have this, I'm literally just going by feel. So at least this, I have an idea as to where, you know, I am putting like the nut back on. So like you can see right here, this was one of them, and without this camera I probably still would have been struggling to put this thing back on. But anyways, one down and 3 more to go.
2,000 years later.
Alright guys, well, I'm finally done after like 4 hours or so. Kind of sucks because I had to take out the turbo like 2 times while it was on the car. Just to show you guys real quick what's really going on. So this entire unit, earlier today I slapped it on. I had to take it out because the stud on the manifold was a little bit too short. You can't see it, but like on the manifold there's 4, it's like a, you know, rectangle, and one of the studs was just too short. So the only way to make the stud longer was obviously pulling the turbo out and then spinning it by hand to make it longer. That way the nut can sit on the stud and, you know, have a good amount of threads in. So that was one strike. Strike 2, pretty much when after I put it in the first time, trying to install return line, as I was trying to like shove that part of the return line in towards like the block, this side of the fitting, or this side of the return line, snapped in half, like it disintegrated. It was just so old because of all the heat abuse and heat cycles and like everything that it's been going through. So this part, as you see in the center, just shattered off. So currently this is the same return line. What I had to do was actually modify it. So thankfully the return line was long enough to where I could cut a little bit and still have enough to where now it doesn't kink in the middle. Like as you can see, it's much better than before. It doesn't fold in. So I was able to work with it. I just really hope that there's no more leaks and it doesn't leak towards that bottom that you see right there. Only because it's not fully, I guess, in the fitting. It's a long enough fitting, so it's only sitting halfway, but I do have a clamp on there that's really tight, and hope for the best, I guess. That's pretty much the update on what's going on. I have the feline installed. I got the V-band back on, and I got the vacuum line from the EBC on. So, and then all the couplers here are tight. So everything's good to go and test out. Unfortunately, it's kind of already late, even though it's only like 5:15. But I don't know if I can start it today or test it. Might have to do that tomorrow. Otherwise, yeah guys, that's pretty much it as far as rebuilding the turbo. Alright, so far so good. There's only very minimal smoke, and that's just from like residual oil or like all the brake cleaner that I sprayed on it. But otherwise, there seems to be no leak on the return line. We should be good so far. I'm gonna go and test drive it, see if there's any more leaks. Alright, so I just took it for another test run, and I think we're good, guys. No more leaks. I think I actually did it. I rebuilt the turbo myself. Heck yeah. Alright guys, well that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions on what I did as far as like the rebuild process, just go ahead and comment down below and I'll try my best to answer you guys' questions. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. I'll catch you guys later and I'll keep you guys updated as always. See ya.